because when I was a kid, I did do a little bit. We did what we would call MMA. So there was a karate guy, there was another boxer, there was a judo guy, and we used to just put pads on, go down the gym, and there was like a little sports hall, and then like a matted area, and we'd just go in there and just spar and fight, and started to realise that like if we get into these tangles, like I've always felt quite comfortable clinching and stuff without any experience. But then when you with someone who knows what they're doing, suddenly you're like, oh, this isn't nice. So then that started to creep into my head a bit, sort of going like, you don't know the ground game, you don't really know the judo throws and all this stuff. Um, and then when I sort of got to the apex of my career, I guess in boxing, went to England camp. It just felt like then as an activity, I could see like where I would go if I followed that, and I could see the peak of it. But it felt like I was missing out loads of other stuff because I was like, I love fighting, I love combat, and I've been on like I've done like fencing and kendo and you know messed around with like knife defense stuff just to sort of to pick it up. And I think the more combat you understand, the better you can be in whatever it is you do. But I sort of felt like after boxing, I was like, well, this is as far as I can get. And I did get to the point where I went away to an England camp, and they did sort of say to me, you should train and try and make the Great Britain squad or whatever. But the reality of it at that point, I was old, and it would have been like, they even said to me, just move back in with your parents and get them to fund you. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm sure my parents would love it if I turned up. I said to them, I'm going to be an amateur boxer.
Yeah.
So yeah. And also I think the other thing as well is when you sort of, some of the guys that I went to that, the England camp with were flipping tremendous. And I saw the level they were at, but then you also see the deficit on the other side of just going, well, that's just all they are though. So amazing, really, really good. But it's like, there's nothing else. It's just like, you're just boxing. So again, it comes down to understanding something in a broader sense, because I think it is combat that I like. I like combat, whether it's, like I say, the grappling, stand up, and even like combative in like understanding the mind and stuff and conversation and arguments. So I think like I got to a point where I was like, the broader I can understand things, the better in terms of combat.
Okay. So would you say that was during boxing that you kind of made that decision that you were going to look for like a full spread of combat as opposed to just go down one avenue and say, look, this is the one for me? Because what a lot of people do is they get comfortable in one facet of combat, and they go, well, I don't want to go and start this new thing over here because they're all doing jiu-jitsu or whatever it is. You could be a grappler and not want to do any striking because, well, I don't want to get punched in the face. I'm a black belt over here, so I don't want to go over there and get punched in the face by someone who's been training 12 months. But you seem to be up for kind of like rebirthing yourself.
Yeah, and I think the thing for me is it's like anything in life, that when you get to a good level, let's say you're a chef and you're amazing in a kitchen or something, but then when you go, I don't know, pick up a musical instrument or you do something way out your comfort zone, you don't do it, but then you don't see that facet of yourself that you haven't developed. So you can get an assumption like, oh, I've made it, but like everyone's a beginner at something. So what I started to do was I started to like look at how I took on new things and some of the teething problems or the tendencies I'd have doing something. It's like my daughter was in the garden earlier on, and she's trying to do this aerial cartwheel at the moment, which is a sick move, but like she's working on it. But she was like to me, Dad, I want to do some gymnastics. So I'm like, okay, what do you want to do? She'd be like, anything. So I give her something that's technical, and she's like, oh, I don't want to do that. She tries once and goes, I can't do it. I'm looking at her like, you div. Do you know what I mean? It's like, you just said you want to do some gymnastics. But I understand that because you want to feel good doing it. But I was the other way around. I was like, I like feeling a bit uncomfortable, not knowing what I'm doing. And then also just being a sponge and going, oh, I didn't realize that. And I realized the more stuff you do to learn, like whatever it is, the more vulnerable you are. And, you've seen this yourself. People come in somewhere and they get battered and they're like, well, actually, I'm a really good boxer. And they want to start talking about that. But it's like, you're in a jiu-jitsu gym, though, mate. So I get it. But I think that humility of going back to the beginning again was a big thing for me, because you get a second chance, like you say, the rebirth. You get a chance to kind of go, well, this time around, I'm really going to pay attention to things. So I think that fascinated me, as well as just getting battered by people and thinking, I don't know how they're doing this. I'm like 7 times as big as them.
Problem is, you get older as you're doing it. So you could spend like 5 years doing one thing and getting half decent.
Yeah.
And then when you restart again, you're another 5 years older. The
Yeah.
trouble is, you've only got one life to
So
try and get good at all these things.
And this is the thing. So the thing I'm thinking at the moment is, and I had a real interesting conversation with someone yesterday.
More interest in this one.
No, we don't have
This is not classed as an interesting conversation.
No. It's not like that, bro. It ain't like that. No, it ain't like that. No. It marries onto it. So I've got a couple of theories, and one of my new theories that I've come out with the last 2 weeks is this Tetris theory. So you remember the game Tetris? So some of the younger guys probably won't remember this, and I've only thought about this the other day. Like, there are some games that I just couldn't understand how people were really good at. I'll be like, I don't get it. How are they so good at that? And it's where your attention is. So if you imagine, the thing with Tetris is you've got all these blocks falling down, and I always felt like I wanted to hit one of those 4-liners, when you just go. So I would chuck loads of blocks to one side, just wanting the right block to come along. But then what I've realized is, actually, with Tetris, if you're good at Tetris, the block that you think you don't want, you set up somewhere else because you know you're going to use it later on. So if you disregard everything that you think you don't know or want, and you wait for that one thing, so I focus on boxing, it's great, but I'm not making use of all the other blocks. And then if you span that Tetris frame wide, whatever block drops down, you can put somewhere. Whatever block, and then, because you map out, and then you start to build these things. And as you build these like contrasting structures, that makes you understand things quicker and better. So I agree with you. Like you're running out of time, but there's definitely a priority in which you can think and act and do things that give positive transfer to other things. So it's trying to think like learning to knit is different from learning a musical instrument or learning jiu-jitsu, but the learning's not different because you learn a certain way, you pay attention to certain things, your eyes and your mind gets fixated on things, and sometimes those things help you, sometimes they don't. So I think the more that you understand your own learning process, that speeds up everything. So I think you have to be clever with it, because if you're blindly doing 5 different sports or things, then actually you're being governed by the instructions you're given. But if you mindfully do 5 different things, you will start to piece together like, oh, that thing relates to that thing, and then you learn in the time you've got left. You will actually pick things up quicker, in my mind.